this is me. And this is my fiance. Together we decided to explore a little bit of South America. In our journey we follow the rise and fall of past civilizations, each built upon the ruins of their ancient predecessors. Together with the myths and stories that held them together, we go in search for the meaning of civilization, both modern and forgotten. How do cultures in some of the world's most inhospitable landscapes create such amazing civilizations, perfecting agricultural techniques and creating architecture unproducible even by modern standards? And just as mysteriously as they appeared, they vanish whence they came, leaving behind no written record. Along the Andean Cordillera, through the Altiplano, valleys, and deep into the Amazonian jungle, we go in search for these answers. It was here in Cusco that the staff of Manco Capac sank into the ground and ushered in the beginning of Tawantinsuyu, the Incan Empire. Cusco was the center of the empire, expanding throughout most of South America. Much like the Roman Empire, the Inca were efficient at conquering, building sophisticated roads unlike any the world has ever seen, and bringing together religious ideas. As the Inca conquered various religious centers, they would obtain gold statues representing their specific gods to take back to Cusco, so that the villagers would have to make pilgrimages to Cusco in order to pay tribute to them and their gods. And just like the Romans, there was but one language used to unify their empire: Quechua. The city of Cusco itself is laid out in the shape of a puma. Here in the Plaza de Armas, there once stood massive temple and palace complexes, which were laid out in the 4 sections representing the 4 cardinal directions. It was also here in the plaza that signaled the end of the Incan Empire, after the last descendant of the Sapa Inca, Tupac Amaru, was executed after starting a long-lasting rebellion against the Spanish in 1572. In front of the Cathedral of Santo Domingo, his descendant, Tupac Amaru II, also met his end by having 4 horses tied to each one of his limbs and being dismembered after starting one of the greatest indigenous uprisings in Peru's history. The Incan Empire was split into 2 after the sudden death of Huayna Capac in 1528, leaving his 2 sons to fight over the right to rule over the empire. The Civil War made it easy for the invading Spanish conquistadors to take advantage of the situation. One of the sons, Atahualpa, was captured by Francisco Pizarro, an illiterate pig farmer from Spain, in 1532 after being ambushed. While Atahualpa was imprisoned, he offered to fill a large room with gold brought over from various parts of the empire in exchange for his life. As trails of gold slowly began trickling in and filling the room, Atahualpa was seen as too much of a liability and was later executed. However, according to legend, the last and largest part of the gold ransom never made it to Pizarro. Upon hearing the death of Atahualpa, they reverted it back to some unknown place. It was at this point that back in Cusco they began to hide much of the gold in secret tunnels shortly before the Spanish invaded the city. Today, much of the population in and around Cusco is largely mestizo, which is a mix of indigenous and Spanish ancestry. In the city of Cusco itself, there are 500,000 residents, and it receives over 2 million tourists annually. Many of the streets are still left intact since the Inca days. A walk down a random street is much like taking a walk back into the distant past. To this day, simple street repairs and excavations reveal parts of even older structures that have been remained hidden for countless years.
Relax. 50? 50. Not 15. Not 50. Oh. That's a lot more. This is
Here, at the Qurikancha, which is Quechua for golden enclosure, there once stood the most important of Incan temples, the Temple of the Sun. Prior to the Qurikancha, the site was originally created by the Wadi culture and used for worshipping the sun. After 1533, parts of the Qurikancha were later torn apart to build the church and convent of Santo Domingo. However, much of the original walls and stone blocks were left intact. Most of the colonial masonry was simply built upon the already existing foundations of the Inca and Wadi. It was here at the Qurikancha that the Spaniards were left speechless as they saw everything literally covered in gold. According to original sources, they found golden walls, floors, altars, statues, and a courtyard of gold, which was all later melted down. Within the garden were golden life-size statues of trees, birds, and every other animal found within their kingdom. Likewise, highly decorated mummies of previous Inca kings were kept inside and brought out only once a year for a public festival. Inside one of the temple chambers, there was a large sun disk made of pure gold, molded after the sun god, Punchao. During the day, the entire temple complex would become illuminated as the sunlight would reflect off the sun disk. During the summer solstice, only the emperor was allowed to enter and sit inside the tabernacle, through which sunlight would seep through a small niche in the wall and would illuminate the room. Surrounding him were all the mummies of the past emperors, and idols from each of the conquered provinces that were held hostage inside. This area of the Andes is vulnerable to earthquakes. During earthquakes, a lot of the Spanish buildings collapse, leaving behind only the intact ruins of the Inca. Here, in Saksaywaman, is what is left of an extensive religious and military fortress. Much of the fortress was taken apart and used to build colonial homes in the main city. What remains is only about 20% of the original structure. 2 years after Pizarro and his men entered Cusco, Manco Inca, another of Huayna Capac's sons, set up a siege to take back the city from the Spanish after being installed as a puppet ruler by Pizarro. Manco Inca almost succeeded, but at the last minute the Spanish took back Saksaywaman. In the end, thousands of dead Inca warriors littered the landscape, and condors descended to feast on their bodies. Saksaywaman is laid out in a 22-walled zigzag shape to resemble the teeth of the puma. Some of the larger stones max out at over 300 tons. Within Saksaywaman, there are said to be intricate tunnel systems that run down into the valley below. During the 1800s, a man is said to have emerged from one of these tunnels after entering near Saksaywaman 1 week prior. It was during Mass in the church of Santo Domingo that they began hearing noises coming from underneath the stone floors. The priest demanded they lift up the stone, and there before them appeared the man who had disappeared holding 2 bars of gold. Many have gone in, only to never come out. In the early 1920s, a team from the University of Lima made their way into the tunnels to conduct a thorough investigation. Communication was quickly cut off, and 12 days had passed until a solitary man emerged. Starving and exhausted, he described a complex labyrinth of tunnels rigged with booby traps like out of an Indiana Jones movie. It was at this point that the government officials went up and caved in the entrances with dynamite.